Welcome to the next phase of the 2020-2021 school year webinar. This is Jennifer Maddox, Public Information Officer of San Jose Unified. With me today are Superintendent Nancy Alvaron, Deputy Superintendent Stephen McMahon, Associate Superintendent Jody Lack, and Assistant Superintendent Dominic Bejarano. Today's session will be recorded and available for replay following the event. We will be responding to questions submitted prior to the session throughout the presentation. This format is different than previous webinars we've held because we wanted to ensure that everyone had an opportunity to ask questions. So we will not be taking live questions during the event, but we will be sharing information on how you can submit additional questions that you have that do not get answered today. I will now turn the session over to Superintendent Nancy Alvaron.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for taking time out of your very busy day to spend the next hour with us, getting information regarding the next phase prior to bringing students back. Again, my name's Nancy Alvaron, and I am very proud to serve as superintendent of the largest and most diverse district in Santa Clara County. So today we're going to be discussing a few points, and then we're going to start by getting oriented to where we have been. After we talk a little bit about where we've been, we're going to talk about our current context, where we are now, then where we're going, and how we plan to get there collaboratively. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. So I want to start by acknowledging that we have never faced the conditions that we are facing today. We have tried to be incredibly thoughtful and intentional in every decision that we make, recognizing that everyone's family, every student, every employee has a unique situation, and that there's no perfect solution to this very complex problem that the world is facing. But please know that we're committed to continuing to do what we believe is best for our students while maintaining the appropriate safety protocols to mitigate risk. So let's go back to June. If you look at the slide that is coming up, we convened a reopening task force. And on that reopening task force, we had individuals representing our parent groups, our parent leaders. We had our union presidents. We had teachers, other support staff, administrators. And this task force engaged in the important duty of looking at various models, not just models that we've seen here in the United States, but international models, looking at the research and what we knew at the time. And the task force made the very difficult decision to select a model. Again, there was no perfect model. Every model had its strengths and definitely constraints. But we landed on a model that we felt would best serve our students while operating within the constraints of the local conditions here in Santa Clara County. As local conditions continued to change throughout the summer and really picking up in July, we made the extremely difficult decision of beginning the school year with full distance learning for all students, which then takes us to our model. I'm happy to report that because of the model that was selected by the reopening task force, this model allowed us to not have to shift significantly. If you look at this image, you see that in our model, it's a flexible model that provides live instruction. So you see a school, and students can be at school, or students can be fully at home, depending on the health conditions. And so these key elements, allowing flexibility for our students to be in the environment that their family found most appropriate or that the health conditions required us to be in, allowed us to make that change seamlessly without a lot of lost instruction, given the health conditions requiring us to stay closed. So if you look at this image or this particular slide, we can see a little more detail with the instructional model that we selected and that we have been using since August. You can see on one side of the slide, teachers are with students in the classroom. The lesson is being live streamed to students who might be participating at home for a variety of factors. but that the current law and education code allows us to provide. That choice was very important to families, and we're happy that the legislature supported that by allowing parents to keep their students in distance learning if they choose to. So some of the highlights of this model that we currently use is that, again, it is synchronous instruction with a teacher for the entire school day. You will see different models around the county, but this particular one allows for a student to be under the instruction or guidance of their teacher for the entire instructional day. It allows students and staff to maintain that special connection with their school community. We heard in the reopening task force how important it was for students to remain with their teacher if they were fully in person, to not have to be reassigned to a different school or teacher potentially if they were fully in distance learning. That was very, very clear as we looked at constraints that different models had. It was important that families and students remained with their current school, and then staff members also stayed assigned to their current location. So again, the strength of this model is it allows us to move from one environment to the next, depending on the health conditions, without a ton of disruption. This model, though, is not a hybrid model where you have different students coming for a portion of the day while other students are accessing recorded lessons. That is the premise of some of the models that are out there, but it was important based on the feedback we received from our parents that they received synchronous instruction with their teacher during that instructional day. Then we move to the slide that shows us what the health conditions were in July, and we see that in Santa Clara County, while we were making progress, we saw in the summer that we started trending in the wrong direction, and you see that the case counts were on a steep upward trend. So again, because of that upward trend, we made the very difficult decision to remain in full distance learning for the first 6 weeks of the school year. And that announcement was made right before school started, and we agreed that we would stay in distance learning through the beginning of October. So at the end of September, we continued to monitor the data, continuing to check in with families through our surveys, and again, made the decision to stay in distance learning through December, given that there were still a lot more cases than when we first closed in March. And we wanted to make sure that we maintained that consistency for students and for staff, and not bring students back to campus too soon, potentially having to close schools again and remain in distance learning. So that brings us to where we are now. We're currently scheduled to be in distance learning through the semester, which will end in December, right before our winter break. And so that brings us to this point to begin engaging and communicating about the next phase of what will happen in our school district and with our students. So with that, I want to turn it over to our Deputy Superintendent, Stephen McMahon, who's going to spend some time talking to you about where we are today.
Thank you, Nancy. Just want to highlight some stats for our current situation. When we made the difficult decision to go with all distance learning in August, we set a goal of connecting with all of our students. Our staff has worked incredibly hard to achieve that goal. The last complete normal school year was 2018-19. You can see on the slide that we had a chronic absentee rate of 9.8%. Chronic absenteeism means missing more than 10% of the available school days. So far this school year, we've lowered that to 6.6%. So I do want to commend our employees, our parents, the entire San Jose Unified community. We set a goal of making sure our students could connect through online learning, and we've done an amazing job accomplishing that goal. At the same time, we need to provide much more than just attendance. While our students are connecting, we know that distance learning is not optimal for many of them, and that they need much more than we can provide in the online environment. So as we go through this discussion, we are focused on making sure we provide an in-person opportunity as soon as we possibly can, because there's so much more to what our school district does than just attendance. Also want to highlight that we've worked really hard to keep everyone in the community safe. Slowing the spread of the virus is much more than just the school district. It's a community effort. But locally here in San Jose Unified, we implemented safety protocols back in July as employees started returning to work in person. We have almost 3,000 employees. The vast majority of them are working at their regular workplace. We have a face covering requirement. We have physical distancing requirements, a daily symptom screen, cleaning protocols, a testing and tracing system. All of these safety protocols have been extremely effective. Some of our employees have tested positive for COVID-19. We've followed our safety protocol, and because we've been following it, there's been no spread of the virus at the workplace. When an employee has tested positive, it came from an external source. So we worked really hard to make sure we could keep our workforce safe. We've been able to do that since July. We have a lot of experience from all of that work that we can apply when students return to our campuses. Throughout this process, we've also worked really hard to make sure we're collaborating with all of our stakeholders, whether that's our local employee groups, our labor unions, other school districts in the area, the County Office of Education, the County of Santa Clara, state agencies. We're all working together to do the best we can to respond to this pandemic. Information changes rapidly. We work with our partners to make sure we understand that information and take the appropriate actions as we go forward. The communication is constant. Everything we're doing is a partnership. I think everyone on this call appreciates that we're continuing to learn about the virus and the best ways to respond. We're not doing this in isolation. We're doing it with our partners and making sure that as we learn new information, we apply it in the most appropriate ways. So we've worked really hard to provide the best distance learning experience possible, to keep all of our employees that are working in person safe, and to do it all collaboratively. We're now at the point where we need to talk about what is the next phase. We've already taken the information we know, we've given our best responses, now we're planning for what comes next. So we're working really hard to make sure our school sites are ready for in-person instruction as soon as we possibly can do that. We cannot predict the health conditions in the future, so we don't know at this time how many of our students will be at home, how many of our students will be at school. As you're going to hear from everyone this afternoon, the focus of this meeting is to let you know what we're doing to be ready for getting students back on campus, hopefully as soon as January. So with that overview of where things stand today, we're going to transition to how we're planning for that next phase, and I'll turn it back over to Nancy.
So, as many of you are aware, California has adopted a new blueprint system to monitor the virus risk level in each county. Santa Clara County, I'm happy to report, continues to make positive progress in the transmission of this illness, and I'm happy to report that we've moved to the orange tier, which designates a moderate spread. And again, I think that really speaks to the efforts in this community to wear their masks and engage in social distancing, but we need to continue to stay vigilant in order to be able to safely return students to school. So what we are doing now is we are planning under the assumption that our county will remain in the orange or yellow tier. So students may be offered in-person instruction starting January 5th. So I want to repeat that we are operating under the assumption that if all things remain the same like they are today, and that Santa Clara County is in the orange tier or better, that we will begin offering in-person instruction to some students January 5th. If we are in the purple or red, which are the lower tiers, we will postpone in-person instruction until the county returns to the orange tier. So again, we are operating off of that assumption that things are going to continue to stay the same or improve. Should we begin to revert and trend in the wrong direction, red or purple, we will delay the opening of in-person instruction. Students will not be required to return to in-person instruction, and they can continue in distance learning for the second semester if families choose that option. If families want to keep their children at home, they will have the opportunity to do that. The district does believe families should have that choice, and the education code for this year supports that right for families. So we're going to continue with our live instruction model. And I want to repeat that I'm really pleased that the reopening task force did such a thorough review of the different models, because the model that we selected at the time of having live instruction with the lesson being live streamed to students that could potentially be at home allows us to move into this in-person setting fairly quickly and with minimal disruption, because the teacher will be in the classroom with a set of students whose families have chosen to have an in-person instructional model. And then the students that have decided to remain in distance learning for a variety of reasons will be able to continue with their lessons, because the class is going to be live streamed. So again, the instruction will continue to be fully synchronous with their teacher. The schedule will be fairly similar. But again, the critical elements are that the families will have the choice to either be at school or at home. They will continue to have live instruction, so there will not be pre-recorded lessons, and continuing to have that live support from their teacher.
Before we move into further details of how we will get there specifically, let's take a minute to take a few questions. I'll be asking questions of our panel, and we'll then give them an opportunity to respond. And we'll be doing that throughout the presentation today. The first question, Nancy, is for you. Can parents opt to keep their students in distance learning if they do not want them to return in person? And can they pick only specific days of the week for their students to attend?
So again, we know that choice is really important for families, and every family is facing a different circumstance. So families will have the option to choose to make a selection, whether they would like an in-person seat or remain in distance learning. And then that selection will apply for the remainder of the school year. In-person students will need to be in person the 5 days a week. Except when there's a need to be at home because of the health conditions, whether the public health department orders a classroom or a school to be home, then in that situation, everyone would be in distance learning, or the select students that need to quarantine for whatever reason would be at home. But again, selecting an option of either in-person or distance will be the choice.
Great, thank you, Nancy. Stephen, this next question is for you. This week, COVID-19 cases in our county have been on the rise. Given the constant fluctuation, will you continue to make school reopening choices on up-to-the-minute data?
So this pandemic presents challenges in all aspects for the school district as well as for families. One thing we've committed to over the last several months is being as consistent as predictable as possible. Things do change up to the minute. So what we're sharing now at the end of October is that we're going to use the state's blueprint for a safer economy to make our determination. If we are orange or yellow on December 30th, we will provide in-person options on January 5th. The reason we picked December 30th is it's the Tuesday before January 5th, and every Tuesday the state of California updates the tiers for counties. The reason we picked orange or yellow is because that means the public health data around our schools is either at the level it's at today or better. If that data is going backwards, when we get to the end of December, then we will postpone, as the superintendent said, the in-person option. So to summarize, we're using the California Blueprint for a Safer Economy, sticking with our commitment till the end of December, and then on December 30th, the state will release the update for Santa Clara County. If we're in the situation we're in now or better, we'll have an in-person option.
Thank you, Stephen. Next question, Jody, is for you. Will teachers be instructing students online and in person at the same time? Is it possible to add more asynchronous options for distance learners?
The live instruction model is the only way that we can fulfill the state requirements for instructional minutes and provide students with synchronous or live contact with their teachers throughout the school day. The instruction for both students in person and students participating from home will be different than it has been because the teacher will need to manage a class with students in different locations. It'll be an adjustment for both the teachers and the students. Our classrooms all have a camera designated to follow the speaker, who would be the teacher, so that classmates at home will be able to see classmates that are in person and will be able to see the teacher as they move around the classroom. Students will continue to use their devices in person to access Canvas and their assignments. We are not looking to add asynchronous options because it creates significantly more paperwork and tracking for teachers, which detracts from their ability to focus on the needs of students. The state requires that all minutes spent on independent work be logged by student by day. So we will continue to provide professional development and support for our staff to improve the teaching and learning this year using this model.
Thank you, Jody. And next question will go back to you. Will there be traditional in-person teaching that takes place off the screen?
Students that attend in person will be able to see their teacher live in person and will not have to join the class WebEx during instruction. But assignments will still be given through Canvas, and all students, including those in person, will still submit their assignments through Canvas. Remember that people on campus will be required to maintain a 6-foot social distance, which will require instruction that is different than what we have traditionally expected.
Great, thank you, Jody. And with that, I will turn it back over to Jody to continue on with how we plan to get there.
Okay. So we're using the Santa Clara County Public Health Guidance for reopening schools as the framework for our plans. We already have many of these pieces in place. All staff and visitors are currently required to wear face coverings on campus. As we build on this safety protocol, when we're preparing for the return of students to in-person instruction, we're updating our current COVID-19 safety protocol to mitigate risk of exposure with students on campus. Face coverings will be required for all in-person students and employees at all times during the school day, except when eating or drinking or during intense physical outdoor activities. Students will be required to adhere to the face covering protocols and will not be allowed to remain on campus if they do not comply. As I stated earlier, all students and staff must remain 6 feet apart at all times during the school day. Currently, our staff on campus are already following this regulation. Classrooms will be modified to ensure that desks are spaced 6 feet apart and students and staff can maintain the 6 feet distancing at all times. The movement of students on campus during the school day will also be modified in order to ensure that staff and students can maintain physical distancing at all times during the school day. The main safety protocol for elementary age students is a stable cohort, which we will maintain, and the main safety protocol for secondary students is face coverings and 6-foot physical distancing.
Great, thank you, Jody. I know that this section is a section that we got many questions on, so let's take a few of those before we move on. Jody, the first one will be for you. Will the district require students to wear masks? What happens if a student refuses to wear a mask?
So students will be required to wear a face covering. We will provide training to make sure that they all understand how to wear it properly to cover both the nose and the mouth. Students who do not comply with this requirement will be subject to the existing discipline policy. We do know that there are some students in special education that are not able to wear a mask, and we will work with them independently to meet their needs while maintaining safety protocols for everyone on campus.
Great, thank you, Jody. And the next question will go back to you. Will the physical distancing protocol be followed in classrooms? How many students will be allowed in a classroom?
The physical distancing protocol is required at all times on campus, and that means including in the classroom. Classrooms that cannot fit the full roster of students with 6-foot distancing will be capped according to the available space in the room.
Thank you, Jody. And you've got all of the questions in this section. This last one is for you too. What will in-person PE look like? Will distance learners still be participating?
So we are still working on the specifics for courses such as physical education, band, choir, drama, and how we will be conducting those with students in person and some at home. We will be providing more details in the next few weeks as we work closely with site staff and reviewing the guidelines to ensure that we can meet the needs of these courses to the best of our ability in this situation.
Okay, thank you, Jody. I will turn it back over to Stephen.
Thank you. So a critical part of our safety protocol has been training and screening. As soon as employees started returning to workplaces, they were required to watch a safety video as well as do a daily symptom screen. So prior to anyone entering campus, whether it's an employee, someone doing work on our campuses, or a student when we get to in-person instruction, these same protocols will apply. The symptom screen is a questionnaire that aligns to the county public health department recommendations. It's trying to sort, does a student, an adult, have symptoms that may indicate they could have COVID-19. The screen's important because it allows us to contact that individual, assess the situation, and take the right steps. That has been in place since July. It's worked great. As soon as we have students on our campuses, that screen will be required of the students who are also coming on campus. We've also had a testing and tracing system in place since July. It's very important that if we do know of an exposure, we have a way to make sure we can isolate those individuals as well as follow up with their close contacts. That's done in partnership with the county public health department. So we are responsible for the workplace and making sure if there's a close contact at work, we follow up and notify them. County Public Health extends that notification to individuals beyond the workplace. So if an employee tests positive, Public Health works with their family while we would work with their coworkers. In the case of students, very similarly. We would make sure we have a system for identifying any student that may have been exposed to COVID-19 and doing the proper notification and follow-up. We've been doing this since July. I mentioned earlier, the safety protocol has led to no spread of the virus in the workplace because we've done a great job expecting all of our employees to do the training, follow the safety practices, and when we do know of an exposure, isolating those individuals and taking the next appropriate steps.
Thank you, Stephen. Let's take a few more questions before we move on. Dominic, we haven't heard a lot from you, so you get the first one. What is the plan for testing employees?
So Santa Clara County issued an order to local health providers to provide COVID testing for essential workers, regardless whether they have symptoms or not. This includes school staff. Employees can be tested through their health care provider or at one of the Santa Clara County health testing sites. We are working with the County Office of Education in multiple districts in the county to expand testing to make it more convenient for staff, and all staff that comes in contact with students will be required to be tested on a regular basis. We will be finalizing the details to the testing requirements soon.
Great, thank you, Dominic. And kind of on the same line, will in-person students be tested on a regular basis?
So we currently do not believe we are able to require in-person students to be tested on a regular basis. We are currently working with our local and state agencies to clarify what we can require for student testing. Students are required to be tested if they have one or more symptoms, or one of their household or close contacts have tested positive.
Great, thank you. And Stephen, let's go to you for this next one. How will contact tracing be implemented in our COVID-19 plan?
I mentioned earlier that it's a partnership. At the school setting, San Jose Unified is responsible for making sure we identify any possible close contacts. Beyond the school setting, we work with public health to identify any close contacts at home or in other environments. So it is a partnership. We make sure we carefully log any individual who came into close contact with someone who tested positive or was exposed, and then we work with public health to make sure they're following up beyond the work, school environment. Again, the system's worked really well for us since July, and we're confident that we can expand it as we welcome students back. In addition, there's a lot of support for this through the County of Santa Clara and the County Office of Education. In the guide to reopening schools, they lay out the scenarios and the possible situations a school might encounter, and then what actions are required and how you communicate. For example, if a student or a staff member has a temperature, we're going to send that student home. We're going to advise them to get a test, notify the administrative team. The classroom will remain open until we know the results of that test. If there's a family member or someone in close contact with a student who tests positive, the student's going to be sent home even if they haven't tested positive. Because they were a close contact to a positive case, that student would be sent home. We tell them to monitor their symptoms. We would continue to stay in communication with them. The classroom would remain open, but we would inform that cohort or that group of students about the student's situation. Third scenario is if there is a positive test for a student or a staff member, that individual is going to be sent home. They're going to need to isolate and not be able to return until they're symptom-free and at least after 10 days. Again, we notify the public health department. They'll follow up with any close contacts for that individual outside the school setting. We'll make sure we notify the community in that case, and the entire school, if there was a positive test within the school, would receive the notification. I'll just elaborate a little bit between the difference between notification and close contact. When someone tests positive, close contacts get very detailed instructions on what they need to do next, including get a test. Individuals that are not close contacts but were around the individual that tested positive are notified to monitor their symptoms and given advice to make sure they watch for the signs of COVID-19. So again, this is a partnership between public health, the County Office of Education, and local school districts. We'll run the same protocol that would be true for all schools throughout Santa Clara County.
Thank you. And Nancy, this last question in this section is for you. Who will be responsible for contact tracing?
So as Deputy Superintendent Stephen McMahon mentioned, San Jose Unified works in partnership with the Santa Clara County Public Health. The school district is responsible for what is called close contact identification, either at the school site or the department, and that entails a series of information gathering about individuals that may be involved and getting all of that information to the county health department in a very short period of time, because they then need to move into the phase of contacting those individuals that are outside of the school location. So each school site will have a point person of contact that will be the point of contact when there are exposures and positive cases. The site or department contact will then work in coordination with our manager of health services, Katie Rodriguez, who is our COVID-19 designee, and she works and coordinates with the public health department. So it is quite an endeavor, but something that our staff has already started to do since we returned the majority of our employees back to work, and we're confident that the protocols are in place to continue to do this when students are on campus as well.
Okay, thank you. And Stephen, with that, we will turn it back over to you.
So another important part of our safety protocol is cleaning and disinfecting. I keep mentioning the work we've done as employees have returned to working at our work sites, which is several months now. So throughout the time people have been working at San Jose Unified locations, we've had a cleaning and disinfecting protocol. Any space that is used by multiple households is cleaned and disinfected at least once a day. Our custodial team is focused on high-touch surfaces and high-traffic or common areas. So spaces where multiple people share them are getting the bulk of the attention, high-touch surfaces and break rooms, eating facilities. We're not doing as much vacuuming as we normally would because our time has been devoted to making sure we focus on cleaning and disinfecting per the guidelines that we receive on how to keep our sites as safe as they can be. Another key safety feature is our ventilation systems. So our HVAC systems have already been set to maximize outside air circulation, and we're replacing all of our filters with MERV 13. These fit with the recommendations that are going statewide. I know there's likely to be a question about this, but HVAC is heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. Our units are designed to be moving the air throughout the room on a regular basis, consistent with the state requirements for public schools. Even if it's not heating the room or cooling the room, it's ventilating the room. What's new is setting that ventilation to maximize outside air. So I'll give you a quick example. Normally on a cold day, we wouldn't pull in maximum outside air because the HVAC system has to work harder to heat that air. We've set all of our systems to maximize the outside air, even though it's less efficient for the machine. It's what's recommended during the pandemic because you want to move as much outside air into the room as possible.
Great, thank you. So let's take a few more questions before we move on. We've talked about a lot of safety requirements that we will have as students return to campus, which brings us to, does San Jose Unified have the necessary budget to meet all the requirements for schools to reopen for in-person instruction? Stephen, will you take this one?
Sure. Public schools in California regularly face financial challenges. I don't think that's anything new to anyone on this call. When the pandemic started, San Jose Unified immediately started saving. We turned off many normal activities to save for this emergency response. So we do have the financial resources necessary to get all of the things we're describing in this call. PPE, other safety materials, the time necessary for the staff to change the HVAC systems, buying the new MERV 13 filters. So it's not as if we have new money. We're not doing things we used to do and repurposing those funds to make sure we can meet all of those commitments. So yes, we have the necessary budget for all of the things we're describing today, and we're confident that those safety protocols will work.
Great, thank you. And Stephen, this one will be for you as well. How are you ensuring adequate airflow in the classrooms? So
regardless of pandemic or not, our HVAC systems are already designed to recirculate all interior air per state requirements. And public schools have incredibly high requirements that are among the safest buildings you can be in, earthquake safe, air filtration. You know, we work really hard in San Jose Unified to make sure that the teaching and learning space is as safe as it can be. I do want to emphasize that HVAC includes the V for ventilation. Even if the building is not being heated or cooled, it's circulating the air when there's an occupant inside the space. What we've done, which is not normal, is reduce the efficiency of the machines to increase the outside air. So I'll give the opposite example. On a really hot day, you normally would filter the air inside because it's already cooler and bring in some outside air. What we've changed the systems to do is go all outside air to the greatest extent possible. So we'll have to have the machines work harder to heat and cool the air, but they'll be constantly pulling in outside air as they ventilate the classrooms.
Great, thank you, Stephen. And Jody, we'll go back to you.
Okay. So we have already put a lot of pieces in place. Our staff already have been given face coverings, hand sanitizer, and disinfecting supplies for their assigned workspace. We are currently in the process of ordering plexiglass physical barriers for adults in the classrooms and for front office, specifically to protect the staff. An additional PPE is going to be included for staff in specific job classes, such as face shields and gloves. If their job requires them to do duties that would be required for a face mask or gloves. And we are using our state and local requirements to make that determination. Each site has formed or is in the process of forming a safety team that will include administrators, certificated, and classified staff. The safety team will be responsible for implementing the district's safety protocols at the work location. The site safety team will work to ensure the protocol is implemented correctly and that staff and students are in compliance with those protocols. They will also work to make sure that communication is happening on a regular basis to stakeholders so that everyone understands the expectations and the need for following those expectations.
Great, thank you, Jody. So let's take a few more questions before we move on. First question is for you, Stephen. Will plastic desk shields be provided for each student?
As Jody mentioned, we're getting physical barriers for indoor activities, but we're doing that based on the recommendations from the health department. There's less of a concern for child-to-child transmission as there is to adults. So we want to make sure that all of our adults have a physical barrier. We really want to focus on the 6-foot distancing piece. We're not going to be able to have enough physical barriers to have it between everyone at all times. So the hard and fast rule throughout all activities in San Jose Unified is going to be maintain a 6-foot distance. That's even more effective than the physical barrier itself. You know, the scientists keep telling us if you wear your face covering and maintain a physical distance, that's the best way to stay safe. So we are getting some physical barriers, but we do not plan to have barriers between each student. We're going to focus with the students on making sure they maintain the 6-foot spacing.
Great, thank you. And Jody, we've talked a lot about what will happen in the classroom. How will students stay distant during the times when they're not in the classroom, such as passing periods, lunch, restroom breaks?
So this is an area where obviously we will need to do a lot of training with our students. Our protocol requires a 6-foot physical distancing at all times on campus. The site safety teams will be working on implementing that requirement on their campus and may need to make modifications to the bell schedules in order to ensure that 6-foot distancing can be maintained during passing periods, during lunch, during the morning break for our secondary schools, and during recess. The start and end time for each campus will not change, but the teams will be looking at their schedule in order to stagger movements in order to increase the opportunities for the distancing. This will also include staggering restroom breaks in order to maintain that physical distancing at that time also.
Great, thank you. And last question in this section, and Jody, we'll give this one to you as well. We've had quite a few parents asking, if students return in person, will school uniforms be required, and would they then be required for distance learners too?
This is a great question. We have not required uniforms for distance learners and have not made a decision about the expectations for in-person learners. We will maintain the expectations for appropriate dress as outlined in our student handbook and need to weigh the benefits of a uniform against the possible added expense to families who are already dealing with so much. The decision will be made in collaboration with site leadership at a later date.
Great, thank you. And with that, Nancy, I will turn it back over to you.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about roles and responsibilities. At the district level, our team here continues to be responsible for logistics, operations, and communications to the community. However, we're also working collaboratively with our school sites, not just the principals, but also the school site safety teams that will be charged with ensuring, verifying, clarifying, sharing, and seeking support if anything might be missing. So again, this is a team effort with all of our employees to make sure that we have everything that we need in place for a return to students in January. And we are committed to supporting our school sites, whether that be deploying individuals from central office or from the courtyard or from other locations to support anything that a school site needs to make sure that we have everything necessary to, offset some of the risk factors. At the school level, again, our leaders will be working with a diverse team of members that will include our classified support staff, our teachers, our custodians, the various individuals to make sure that they're implementing the protocols, that their school site is in compliance, and that there's two-way communication with the central office staff to make sure that we are ready for that return. And then I just want to close by saying that Santa Clara County is in the orange tier now. If we continue to be in the orange or yellow tier, we will offer in-person instruction beginning in January. Now, the specifics of that, you will get more information, but I think this is step one of announcing this intention of bringing students back starting in January. In the next several weeks, we will continue to work on preparing for that return to campuses and updating you as we make progress. The very next communication you should be receiving should be the process for families that will be making a selection of in-person instruction or distance learning. We're going to ask families to please be on the lookout for that communication and make that choice as soon as possible so that we can continue planning for that January date. We're also continuing to prepare the school sites, and we will be doing that throughout this time. And then, I met with all of our labor leaders last week. We have a great relationship. San Jose Unified is known throughout the state as a leader in labor relations, and so we are going to continue to work collaboratively with our employee groups to be ready for students in January. And again, we're going to give you more communication. You should see more coming now that we're getting ready for this next phase. And then our employees will continue to receive updates as we go through this process.
Great, thank you, Nancy. I think we have some time for a few more questions, so I will go ahead and pose those to the group. Jody, the first one, and this one came in extremely frequently, has a hybrid model where classes are split in half and only go on certain alternate days or AM, PM. Has that been considered?
Yes, our reopening task force did consider that, but you need to remember that a hybrid model would require students to be on their own for a portion of the week, completing tasks without the support of the teacher. So our task force determined that the hybrid model did not meet the requirements for students to have access to their teacher throughout the school day, every day. This model also negatively impacts our ability to maintain a stable cohort at the elementary level because the teacher would be in the classroom with different groups of students.
Thank you. And next question, Dominic, this one is for you, also a quite frequently asked question. Even if there continues to be online learning in the winter or spring, can high school sports still happen in some form?
So the organization that oversees California sports, California Interscholastic Federation, is planning to hold 2 seasons, one starting December and one in March. As the first day of practice approaches, we will stay in communication with our local leagues, Central Coast Section and Blossom Valley Athletic League, to see if the seasons will continue to move forward. We are currently not holding conditioning camps to coincide with our decision to continue distance learning through December. We will revisit the conditioning camps as the seasons get closer and the determination that the seasons will move forward.
Great, thank you, Dominic. And next question, Stephen, we'll send this one to you. Is there an agreement with the teachers union? And if not, do we need one in order to reopen?
We've reached 2 agreements with the Teachers Association. The first was for the first 6 weeks of the school year, and then we've extended that through December 18th. So there is an agreement in place now. As I mentioned earlier, we're continuing to collaborate with all of our stakeholders on the next phase. So we're working closely not only with our teachers union, but our other 4 unions. And we have a strong partnership between our employees, their labor representatives, and San Jose Unified. We know that we can get there by working together. We've already had a joint call with all of the unions, and everyone was in agreement that if the health conditions remain favorable, this is the right path forward. So I think that partnership and that collaboration, those open conversations where we're on the same page, discussing the same topics is key to us moving forward. Again, I think we've emphasized throughout this call that we're planning for the next phase. We are in the orange now. If things stay the same or get better, we're going to work together to provide an in-person option for our students. Our teachers recognize the need to be there for our students. As well as distance learning is gone, we have to do more for many, many of our students. We also understand as a school district that if public health conditions around us are worsening, it's not the right time to come back. So we've already made good progress by having that joint call and getting all of our unions to agree on that fundamental step forward, that if things are as they are now or getting better, in-person instruction is very important to our students. If things are worsening around us, we have to reassess.
Great, thank you. And Jody, next question back to you. How are you supporting teachers to ensure they're ready to teach a class with some students at home and some in person?
We are continuing to provide additional professional development, and we're shifting the focus to be able to better support the use of the L camera, the use of, or the focus on classroom management when you have students in 2 different settings, thinking about that blended classroom and the way to engage students in different settings. And then also thinking about how to make sure that we're training our students to comply with the safety protocols. So that support will be provided at the district level, and we'll continue to roll out professional development over the next couple of months. Site staff also continue to have access to instructional coaches who can provide additional professional development that is differentiated to meet the needs of the school staff.
Jennifer, I just want to elaborate a little bit on that question too, and this is really a direct plea to parents. It's important that when we have students return to campus, that we understand that these are different times. We cannot envision an elementary lesson the way those lessons were carried out pre-pandemic. This requirement for adults to maintain distance from the students will really be different than what you normally see. And as a former primary teacher, I really want to just highlight that for parents so that we can begin to manage the expectations that that instruction has to be different. The proximity is a big strategy that's used at the elementary level to work with students, to redirect students, to check for understanding, and that is going to be a strategy that we're not able to leverage in the same way because of that need to require physical distancing. So in some cases, it might look like distance learning it does at home, except the student is going to be in the classroom with their teacher. But we do agree that even that level of interaction between the teacher and the student live is going to make a significant difference in the lives of our students.
Thank you. That is an important distinction. And I think we have time for one more question. Stephen, this one is coming to you. Are there any options for soliciting community support on a school-by-school basis to help reduce risks of returning to class?
The pandemic has taught us the importance of having safety systems, testing, and tracing that go throughout the community. So all of our safety protocols are for all employees and all students, and it's really important that we do it district-wide. We want to make sure we're on the same standard with the same expectations so that the safety teams know what to implement. So we are not encouraging individual parent groups to implement their own safety systems or get their own PPE or try to modify the district standard. That's only going to create confusion on the best practices. The San Jose Unified standards are set with public health. We'll make sure that all of the necessary supplies are available to all of our students, all of our schools, and all of our employees. There are many ways for individual parent groups to help, encouraging everyone to follow the rules. So doing the symptom screen, reminding your children to wash their hands, doing great videos on hand washing, modifying your school song to include hand washing. There's lots of ways we can get help from our parent groups. What we don't want to do, though, is modify the safety protocols. We want to reinforce them. So our parent groups helping reinforce them would be amazing. We need to get ahead of this virus as a community. If there's funds that could be donated, our student nutrition department has a way to donate meals to other families. That is something that is still a great need in our community. Fundraising for meal service and getting meals to families that don't have access to them now would be a great benefit. But I do want to emphasize the importance of a district-wide response and doing all of this together. Individual parent groups need to reinforce the safety protocol that will be in place as students return.
Thank you, Stephen. And with that, I think we are nearly out of time. So Nancy, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, so I just want to very quickly summarize once again the key points from this particular session. There will be additional opportunities to get information, but we wanted to take this time to give you the main ideas of what we are thinking at this time. So one being that we have every intention of opening for in-person instruction on January 5th if we are in the orange or yellow tiers. The very next step, you as parents will have an opportunity to make a selection for the placement that best meets the needs of your family, whether that be in person or for distance learning, and that is coming in November. We're continuing to prepare our school sites for that return of students. We're working continuously and with our labor groups to not just be prepared, but also to discuss the working conditions that are going to need to be in place for all of our employees. We're going to continue regularly communicating with our parents and our employees, and you will see that there will be more communication between now and that January date. And before we close, I want to let you know that I recognize that there's still a lot of questions, and I really want to thank the people that submitted questions ahead of time so that we were able to build that into our content. But I encourage you to think about what we discussed today. If you have additional questions, please send them to our PIO at sjusd.org. And we will take the frequently asked questions and put out a communication so that you have some additional information about that. And then finally, I just want to thank you for all of your time, your patience, your support over the last 6 months. This has been the biggest challenge of all of our lives, I believe. And as parents, we know how difficult and how elating sometimes it has been. But we also recognize that this has been possible because of your partnership and your support. So thank you for everything that you do, and we will be in communication soon. Have a great afternoon.
And Nancy, just one more thing. For those of you that have middle and high schoolers also, the content of the presentations tomorrow will be very similar to today. So if you feel like you got the information you wanted, you do not need to attend those. There's not going to be a significant different discussion tomorrow. Thank you.